welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we've got a baller show lined up for you. We've known Bill Jenkins for a number of years and had a really great relationship with him and the school. They have done private walk-in auditions for us, as well as most recently a masterclass with Michael Rafter and Didi Baptiste that Bill mentions at the end of the pod. And right after the pod, we quickly dove into chatting about some amazing specific MTCA/Ball State alums, of which there are many. Today on the pod, we get into recruiting great human beings and the difficulty of soft skills. We talk about their multiple showcases. They have showcases in 3 different cities and how it works with getting into those showcases at Ball State. We talk about making students pivot quickly, sort of creating adaptable students. We talk about giving and giving back and Ball State's history of beneficence. We talk about this idea of you're interviewing the school as much as they're interviewing you. We talk about proactive versus reactive and what the mindset of universities should be, how to activate their goals. And we talk about the balance of having grace and demanding rigor. But Meghan, before we get too deep into that, how was your Thanksgiving?
Oh, thanks, Charlie. It was wonderful. So I'm the youngest of 5 siblings, so it's very rare that all of us get together. So this Thanksgiving was a Thanksgiving in a while that we all haven't been together, and my nieces were there as well, which is always the joy of the fam. So it's very exciting. But we've talked briefly about your Thanksgiving, but you were also at the Sondheim tribute this weekend. How was that?
Yes, we all were mourning the loss of Sondheim this weekend. I thought that event went so beautifully. I was really touched with how many people showed up and how many performers, especially over the breadth of his life that we really saw. Some people who were very new to him and maybe had an ancillary relationship. Some people who had known him for 60 years and had original Broadway jackets on and some of those stuff. It also was really sweet because I felt like I got to feel a little bit of the embrace of the community and the kind of family that it really is. So many people, I was there with a hungry baby. And so right after the event, I ran up to Elizabeth so we could feed her. And so many people who I don't know personally at all recognized Solvay and me from, I guess from Instagram, but it really feels like a family. She's over there. I was I don't know who you are, but thank you. So nice. It was really, really sweet. It definitely was one of those New York City events that I was so glad to be at,
Yeah.
You have that experience, I feel a lot in the city. I'm sure everywhere too, but I feel I've had that experience a lot in the city where you could be at something with 50 people, but you're this is the right room to be in tonight. On this Friday, these 50 people at this weird piano bar, at this weird cabaret, or, at this new play reading that nobody's seen yet, but it's just this is special. This is a special thing to be at. It definitely felt a little bit like that. There must have been maybe a couple hundred people there, but it definitely felt like an event that kind of resonated throughout the country. And so it was kind of nice to be there. And I've missed that feeling through the pandemic, right? I've missed having the feeling of being at a place that was important to be at because we spent so much time on these damn screens. That really felt nice.
Yeah, and what a beautiful way to have a tribute for him. He brings all of these Broadway communities together, and I think someone mentioned online that every Broadway show is represented in some shape or form in Times Square, which is so cool and such a way to be memorialized.
Yeah. And it's so interesting when someone dies later in life, there definitely were people there who were really weeping and who were really choosing to find a grief and a mourning from his passing. I think I'm feeling a little bit more it was a celebration. It felt like that was a lot of the vibe of it was let's celebrate the amazing gifts he has. Of course, all reactions are right. You'll see the varying reactions online. You'll see them, whatever. There's nothing wrong with how you feel. But it did feel especially with him getting to live this full life and really have the breadth of his career, you had so many people just really joyful about him too, and all that he's done and all that he's brought. And so even though many people were crying, it felt like a lot of the tears were tears of joy at the beauty of this work and the sort of life that this man led.
Yeah. And then in addition to your exciting weekend, we got some exciting stuff coming up in MTCA, right?
We sure do, Megan. Thank you for reminding me. This is really just, I want to throw all of you a heads up. We're having an event specifically for juniors or for younger students. It's really aimed at juniors, but you're welcome if you are a younger sophomore, freshman, et cetera, or the parent of one such student. We're going to be having like a fun workshop style event, which is really a chance to meet MTCA or for any students who just want more information about kind of launching their college audition journey. Is this right for me? Do I want to be somebody who's potentially looking at theater schools for college? It's a really low commitment. It's only going to be $20, and you don't have to commit to anything beyond that. We'll be releasing a lot more information next week in terms of an exact date, time. You'll have ways to click and sign up and other things. I just wanted to put it on all your radars just in case you're one of those people who's only a college deep dive listener and
Mm,
not an artist exploration listener. We discourage that, Megan. We want everyone to
yes.
listen to everything. But in case you don't listen to both, look out for that in next week's episodes. And or if you just can't wait, we're releasing this information later this week. So you could go to mtcollegeauditions.com. Just generally, you could be checking us out as of early next week. It will be up on the website for sure. Well, with all that, let's get into this episode with Bill. Well, we are honored to have Bill Jenkins on the pod today. Bill has a bachelor's and master's degree from this very Ball State University. He has an MFA in directing from Illinois State University. He is an active professional director, having directed over 50 shows all over the country, and is currently the chair of Ball State's Department of Theater and Dance, where he serves as a full professor of musical theater, directing, and acting, and was named the Outstanding Administrator at Ball State in 2015. Ball State is in Muncie, Indiana. They take classes of about 20 to 22 students and offer degrees as a BFA in acting, a BFA in musical theater, BFA in dance, and some other creative degrees, which we may get into today. Bill, welcome on the pod. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this, and we're so fond of MTCA and all the fabulous students that we get, and the wonderful things that you provide to students in this day and age. It's great to get students who are well prepared and students who are on their game, and certainly MTCA students come to us with that all the time. So thank you for having me.
So nice. And to begin with a compliment, my gosh, what a way to start. I love it. Why don't we, before we dive too deep into Ball State, just tell me a little bit about your own background and kind of how you found yourself back teaching?
As you said, I went to Illinois State University, had a great time there working with the Illinois Shakespeare Festival and working professionally in Chicago, and taught. My first teaching gig was at the University of North Dakota, which is cold. And then by happenstance, a job came up to coordinate the musical theater program here at Ball State. And I applied and got the job. And then a couple of years later, the department chair took another position, and I got an interim position. And, now I think this is my 19th year as chair at Ball State. So
19.
I've
Wow.
been very fortunate and have made Ball State and Muncie my home. And my wife and myself and our two kids have really found this place to be a great place for us and a great fit. And Ball State is a community of people that I love, and
Mm.
it's an institution that I believe in a great deal, and what we stand for and what we strive to do with our students. So I'm looking forward to talking about that today, and just talking about this crazy sort of coming out of COVID. What does this world
Yes.
look like for this profession?
Yeah, well, what such a great segue. So let's get into a little bit of sort of what that culture you've created. In brief, what do you feel like it means to be a Ball State student? What do you sort of see as the ethos of someone who wants to go to Ball State?
I always say that we are really interested in recruiting talented people, but we're more interested in recruiting great human beings. I think that's the number one thing I care about. I think we all care about. I think the thing that's come out of COVID for me the most, and I don't, everybody's sort of going to be different, is you realize how fortunate we are to do what we love, but also how much we rely on being with people who we love while we're doing it.
Mm.
And I think that's something that I have learned even more so than I knew before. One of the things that we talk a lot about here is that you are basically, when you're selecting students to go into a program, when you're going into auditions and you're looking for a group of people to be with you for 6 weeks, you want to select people that you want to be in the room with. Like,
Hmm.
who do you want to spend time with? And I always say to students when they graduate or when they leave, look, if you end up losing out on a job because someone may maybe can sing higher than you, or maybe can dance a little bit better than you. That's okay, because that's the
Mhm.
reality. And it's about taste. It's all subjective. But if you ever lose out to somebody because someone says, I would rather be in the room with that other person as a human being,
Mhm.
that's where I feel like we've not done our job.
Mm.
And so I think I work really hard to make sure students do the things that some people call soft skills, but I think they're the hardest skills, that are the most important skills, which are, how do you be prepared? How do you always arrive on time, which is
Mm.
early, ready to work? How do you always make people around you better? How do you always take a note? How do you find ways to make the people, the community of artists that are surrounding you feel like you've made the room a better place?
Mhm.
And I think that is something that we don't talk enough about. And I think we're going to start talking more about it post COVID, because I
Mm.
think we realized how much we've missed it, and how much we really, really realizing how much we valued that more than we thought maybe we did. And that's something that
Mhm.
we've always valued here.
I love it. And I appreciate your pun with the hardest and soft skills. I also appreciate you living and the truth of your lessons. You were 10 minutes early to our pod today. I mean,
Listen, listen. Yeah, to be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late.
mm,
That's the thing. And
that's the
again,
thing.
I think time is money, and you're wanting to make sure you're saving people money,
Mm.
by doing the best work that you can. And also, it shows why people need to value paying for the arts, and
Mhm.
paying people for their work. We've been having this conversation when we ask students now, alums, to come back and work with our current students, and give us a little bit of time. One of the other things out of COVID I said is, we're never asking anybody to do anything for free anymore. I mean,
Mm.
it's
Mm.
always, even if it's, here's $25, here's $50, here's $100, something, or gas or whatever. We have to start valuing what it is we're doing in ways that, I don't think the world did prior to COVID, and is starting to realize they have to do now.
It's such a good point. Okay, so other than some of those softer skills, those difficult soft skills that you're teaching, how if I do come into Ball State and I feel like I'm a really good fit for the program, I'm everything that you want in terms of spending 4 years with someone, from a curricular perspective, how am I gonna come out changed 4 years later? So what am I gonna learn over the course of my 4 years at Ball State?
We work really hard to make sure, first of all, no matter where the student is, that they're an actor. We want students who know how to tell stories. And so, whether it's dancing, singing, or acting, or musicianship skills, which is something I'll talk about in a second, we want to make sure that you are a storyteller who understands how to put narrative first in everything you're doing. We want to make sure that you are a triple threat, and or if not a triple threat, you can fake the third one so much that students, or no one knows the difference of whether you can do it or not. But we really want to make sure students can do all three.
Mm.
And we also want to do two things. One, we want to make sure students who have strengths can make those strengths even greater strengths while they're here by taking advanced classes. You mentioned we have a BFA in dance. So if
Mhm.
you're a musical theater student, we want to make sure that you are able to take advanced dance classes with our BFA dancers. Um, if you're an acting student who has a potential for a career as in camera or film, we want to make sure that we give you lots of experiences working on film projects with our telecommunications, and sort of our entire sort of film component that we have for students. We want to make sure you get a lot of chances to do that. We also
Mhm.
want to improve those skills that may be deficient when you come in. So whether it's extra classes in musicianship, whether it's extra classes in dance, or an additional class in acting, whatever's going to bolster you and make you stronger, we want to make sure we do. We also really hit very hard on this musicianship idea and this musicality idea.
Hmm.
All of our students in the musical theater, and this kind of goes along with acting too, in the fact that in our acting program, all students do a senior capstone that is basically a one-person show. They have to create it on their own. They have to basically start it from scratch, and it can be anything they want it to be, but it's got to be, narrative has to be at the heart of it, a personalized sort of something that they connect to. For our musical theater students, it's a cabaret class. That cabaret class is taught by Sutton Foster usually. Sutton's not teaching it now because she's doing Music Man. So Sierra Bogus is in, and she's doing the class with our colleague Michael Rafter. Students do that cabaret. We do it in Indianapolis at the Cabaret, which is a beautiful cabaret venue down in Indianapolis. And then we go to Joe's Pub in March, and all the students get a chance to do their senior cabaret there. So we want to make sure that students, and they don't just create the songs, they don't just create sort of the ideas, but they are rewriting the music. They are changing everything musically, and they are learning how to deal with creating work for themselves when work doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, and cabaret is one of the places where that happens. So, we feel like making students as prepared as possible by giving them the tools so that they can create work for themselves when work isn't there. And that was really beneficial during the pandemic, because a lot of our students found that some of the best creative work they said that they ever did happened when they were sitting in a room having to figure out, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And so those skills are really important. We also want to connect people to not only industry professionals. We're very fortunate in the fact that our showcase programs, which are successful, we do 3 in Chicago, New York, and LA. All of them are successful, I think, because we're teaching our students great skills when they're here, but also because we connect with industry professionals from the different cities who come in and work with the students. So in New York, it's Rachel Hoffman. She comes in. Rachel's been terrific to us. She's worked with our showcase now for 7 years. She directs the showcase. She also selects the students. So because we offer 3 different showcases, we do not take all of our students, because we do the acting and the musical theater and the dance showcases together. So if you come in as a dance major, you can audition for the showcases. You can also get into 3 showcases. Some students don't get into any showcases, and some students choose not to go to any showcases because they're going to go to grad school, or they want to go to Atlanta and do film work, or that's totally their prerogative. But we feel like it's our job to prepare students for the professional world. And so we think of the showcases as the first step in that professional training. And the capstone experiences, whether it's the one-person shows or the cabarets I mentioned earlier, we feel like that's our opportunity to give students sort of a culminating experience. There's a lot of industry professionals that come to our cabaret at Joe's Pub. Students have signed with people from that cabaret, but the showcases are different for us. We want those to be bridges to the professional world, but we also want students to understand what that audition experience is going to be like in the professional world. And then the final thing I'll say is related to that is we also believe in connecting our students to an alumni network that can help them once they leave. I think those alumni networks are really the way in which our students feel connected once they leave Muncie, Indiana, still to their institution. So we have great alumni networks in all 3 major cities, along with other places across the country, that can help our students, not just with getting work, meeting people, but also telling students where they can do their, where do I go for the best food in this city, and where do I live, and all that stuff. We give you a mentor that sort of helps guide you in those different cities, so that every student has that once they leave. So those are some of the skills that I think are real important for us.
So cool. What a comprehensive answer. So I'm going to break down at least 2 of those points that you just made. So with all that said about the different disciplines, it sounds like, if I'm hearing what you've said, would you feel comfortable calling yourself an acting-focused musical theater school? Is that still primary for you of the 3 disciplines?
I think what I would say is that we believe that whatever skill set, I think we're a triple threat program, but I think when students come in, the big thing we would say is there are some programs that allow students to jut off, like they're going to be dance focused or they're going to be acting focused. We believe everyone needs to be able to tell stories. And so I think it's fair to say that our program, no student leaves our program without the ability to be a storyteller that understands the value of that in whatever they're doing within musical theater. And we just did a dance concert here that was extraordinary, called The Valley of the Four Dolls, which was a original creation by one of our dance faculty members. And, we brought in the American College Theater Festival to evaluate it and adjudicate it, which we always do. And one of the comments that the person made was, well, I'm a little out of my element. I'm not really, I'm not a dance person. I'm a design person. This is the person that came in. And I said, well, we're now seeing that defining things, putting things in boxes, doesn't really happen anymore, whether it's devised theater or whether it's, creating new musicals, or whether it's creating a dance concert where it's being told by musical theater performers, but there's narrative at the heart of what's happening.
Hmm.
We want to make sure that we are always emphasizing that. So I don't know if that's a way of avoiding that answer, but I would
No,
say
it's a great answer. It's
narrative first, I would say, is probably the case.
And we're always here looking to hear your narrative and how you put things, more than where can we put you specifically in a box. The other thing I'll just compliment from what you said, which it seems like some schools are talking about in terms of a pandemic reaction, but it seems like the ability to create your own work and tell your own stories is also just speaks to the world that is, the modern world. I mean, that's been true for 10, 15 years, even before
Yeah.
the pandemic, of how can you tell your own story? How can you, whether it is in cabaret form or in writing, or, the multi-hyphenates that so many of our artist series we talk about. That's really smart to be preparing students that way.
And I think, I guess the other thing I'd say in that is that I think what we're trying also to do, and I think every program should strive to do, we've got to make people be able to pivot quickly from thing to thing without
Mm-hmm.
feeling like that's not what I was trained to do. I think
Mm-hmm.
any program that's worth their salt has to figure out how to make students adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I don't know, I just feel like we got to a point several years ago, and I think it's gotten so much better. And again, I think the pandemics, we look for bright spots in the pandemic. This is one of them, I think. Being able to make someone, with regardless of situation, be able to go, oh, I can do that. Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
know how to do that. Every one of our students has to work a practicum their first year. And it's because if they can figure out, oh, I love makeup. How can I how can I create something where makeup's also involved in that? Not only does that help them get their first job, maybe when they first get out, their day job, but it
Mm-hmm.
also, I talked to one of our graduates recently, who did a creative writing minor while she was here, and she's now um, using that as she does a lot of editing, and so she's able to work that editing job, which pays her a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
around the art that she's doing, because she's doing a lot of film work. And I just
Mm-hmm.
think you've got to find ways to tell students those skills that you're learning in the arts, people in other disciplines desperately want them.
Mm-hmm.
They need them. Problem solving, working with teams. I mean, all of that stuff is so helpful. And I think sometimes people thought that, well, that's more liberal arts. That's liberal arts. That's not necessarily when you're getting a BFA. I think that that's crazy. I think it needs to be regardless.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was my.
Well, another great segue to my next question is just about kind of outside of the theater program. Tell us a little bit about what does Ball State offer a student that goes beyond just theater? It could be academics, could be about the campus facilities, et cetera.
I'm one of the things I'm most proud of is that we have the highest percentage of students at Ball State who are in our honors college here at Ball State. Theater and dance does. The department is, we have a large department. We're about 500 majors. We've got 45 full-time faculty and staff, so it's a big place. So I think that the university is a tremendous supporter of the department. We are at the forefront of everything the university does. And so I think that that's always something that I think students look for when they come to a campus is, how do people view the theater and dance program? Is it
Mm-hmm.
important? And I think that that is the case here. Ball State's a beautiful campus. If you haven't had a chance to visit, I frankly think you should go. And this is, again, something else that we lost a lot in the pandemic, is people just being able to go to different campuses and look
Mm-hmm.
around. I think seeing the place makes all of the things you may have heard come to life, or
Mm-hmm.
may run counter to what you thought you knew. Sometimes students go, oh, I always thought I wanted to go to this place, and then I went there and I went, maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's a beautiful campus. It's a very manageable number. We're a mid-sized institution, about 20,000 students. It's got a Division I athletics program, so we've got a football team and a basketball team, which I think is great for students to be able to have that campus life. But I also am pleased that there's a real focus on the arts and on things outside. A lot of great organizations that students can join in, whether it's student government or working with different entities across campus. We've got improv teams and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that. Muncie is a typical Midwestern community, meaning it is, sort of the campus is sort of the heart of the city. What I
Hmm.
do think Muncie has been able to do maybe better than a lot of other Midwestern cities is it has been able to sort of deal with the downturn and sort of the moving away from blue collar jobs and figuring out how to reinvent itself. Um,
Mm,
Ball State was actually founded in 1918 by it was the Ball brothers, and there were 5 Ball brothers, and it's ball jars. That's what Ball
mhm,
State is, ball jars that you use to can. And
mm,
what happened was the Ball brothers came to Muncie, Indiana, and started their company, their glass company. And when we got to, again, right about 1918, when World War I was happening, in an effort to help the state of Indiana, they gifted Ball State, which was a young teachers college at that point.
mm.
They gifted the land and all things Ball State to the state of Indiana with the hope that it would be a boom for the city of Muncie, and it did. It started as a teachers college that expanded into a university. So there's a great deal of history here that I think is really valuable. And the theme of Ball, or the Ball State sort of symbol, is beneficence, which is an angel that
Hmm.
was given by the state of Indiana to Ball State as based on the sort of the giving nature of the institution, and
Hmm.
beneficence, which is the name of the angel, which was created by the same artist that created the Lincoln Memorial, by the way.
Hmm.
Beneficence is this symbol of giving and giving back, which is
Hmm.
also, I think, at the heart of what we do here. So I think it's a great community for a lot of things for students, because I think it embraces all those values that we really care about. But it's also just a really warm, welcoming place, an environment that makes students feel safe and understood and heard and sort of embraced as college students.
I love it. And for basketball fans, these are not the same Ball brothers of Lonzo and LaMelo,
That is
the big
correct.
baller brand. Okay,
That is
good. Just double checking.
100%.
That would be impressive if they did all of that though so quickly.
That would be absolutely impressive. No, as a sports fan myself, we are not part of the current Ball brothers, if you will. So
Wait,
yeah.
you can't say you're a sports fan yourself after yada yadaing the football. You're like, yeah, we have football. Yeah, we have a basketball team. I was gonna be like, well, Bill obviously doesn't like sports.
Season tickets to the Colts football team, which is
Hey,
why
now, okay.
I was a very state of denial today. It was a rough weekend for the Colts. No,
Yes.
we are. I've been to 12 Final Fours. No, you're talking to somebody who is a sports nut.
All right, you're on the right pod here. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Our listeners and I have a love-hate relationship. They have a love-hate relationship with my sports analogies that I make at the end of every podcast. But
Listen,
it is what it is.
sports. Listen, this is my little 1 minute thing here. Sports and what we do are the same exact
Mm,
thing.
Talk about it, Bill. Talk about it.
The How you practice slash how you rehearse
Mm,
is that's what matters. The game, the show is all residual of how well you are doing that skill
mm,
building during practice. And
mm.
so the idea of the ballet bar is no different than the football player going through the beginning of practice and all the drills that they're doing, or shooting free
Hmm.
throws if you're a basketball player, or sitting in the batting cage if you're a baseball player. And if you can't
Well,
do
you wouldn't want
that,
to sit in the batting cage, though. That's
no,
not gonna. That's not gonna
stay.
help.
Yes, exactly. Uh, if you don't like that part, find a
Hmm.
new profession,
Hmm.
because that's where the real art, to me, that's where the real discipline in the art is created.
Beautifully said. I'd just love to talk. You mentioned a little bit about it in terms of the different disciplines. I'd love to talk a little bit more about sort of how the cross discipline works. So, if I'm an actor who is really kind of interested in musical theater, but I think I want to focus on acting, or a musical theater major who is really into dance, or a dance major who, how does that work if I want to go one, but I do have some real interest in some of the others?
We very much believe in what we call permeable silos, which basically are like everybody is in their sort of curricular program, but everybody can move to those other programs as the opportunities present themselves. So
Mm,
examples of that, we have musical theater students in plays and dance concerts all the time. We have dance students in musicals and plays all the time. We have acting students in musicals and dance concerts all the time. We don't believe in you're here for, 4 years and you're going to do only musicals. That's crazy
Hmm.
to us. This is the time where you should be experimenting and trying and failing, because ultimately we're never going to do the quintessential production of anything here. What we're going to do is an extension of the classroom. That's what this is
Hmm.
about. How can we take that work in the classes and in an artful and beautiful and sometimes magical way tell stories, but it's ultimately about learning about those areas where you can get better. And so for us, those silos and those permeable silos, that manifests itself in everything that we do. So if you're an actor or a musical theater student and in your end of your time, you want to take a class over in our music department, we have one of the best music recording facilities in the country, and you want to go over and take a class over there in more commercial sound, you can do that. If you want to take a playwriting class, you can do that. If you want to take classes in creative writing or anything, you want to do in the BABS programs, we don't have this, can't happen in the BFA programs, but the BABS programs, you want to do double major, we encourage that. We figure out ways so students can expand their horizons during their 4 years. And in our program, I think what we're attempting to do as much as possible is give students the rigor so that they can succeed in their discipline, but the flexibility within that rigor, especially after a student has proven themselves over time, that they can
Hmm.
go outside of their area of discipline to create those other skill sets that will make them stronger as an artist. So I think that's something that we always work to and strive to towards with students. The one thing I will say about that, and it's just, I think, a reality that everybody should check as they go and look at programs, you know, that one of the things that's happened more and more is that students want everything. Like, students come in and they want to do it all. And I think that we have worked really hard to say to students, we know from our experience that you can have flexibility here and you can have flexibility here, but you can't have flexibility here,
Hmm.
because this place is a place where those skill sets take time. So, one of the things that we've worked really hard at with that has to do with, can I test out of these classes? Well, no, certain classes you can't test out of. Certain
Hmm.
classes you can, certain classes you can't. And they said, well, I already have experience with that. We get it, but we also understand that what we're teaching in many ways may be different than what you've taught, what you've had before.
Hmm.
I think making sure you explore all of that with the schools you look at is important, because I think that the worst thing that you can do if you walk in is have expectations that are based on you not asking questions initially. So ask
Hmm.
as many questions as you can, because you should be interviewing a program as much as they're interviewing you. You should be feeling like in the end you've gotten all your questions answered, as opposed to the program just saying, let me see you do all of your skills and then I'll determine whether or not you fit, quote unquote, which I think is crazy. So.
So true. My last question about school is just, so as you now, have accepted students, and students are doing those beautiful visits and checking out the wonderful Muncie, and seeing, does this school feel like it's the right fit for me? Why do you feel like students sometimes will say no? Why would a student say, actually, Ball State's not necessarily the right school for me?
It's a great question. I think sometimes it has to do with location. Some students want to be in a more urban setting. That is not who we are.
Hmm.
I think that there's strengths and weaknesses between urban and rural, and I think just knowing that going in, I think some students want a college experience. They want the college campus. They want the football. They want the basketball. They want, uh, you know,
So you're
dorm life.
yada yadaing it again. You're
I
rolling your
didn't
eyes at
yada
football and
yada.
basketball.
Didn't yada yada. I almost said it, but then I went no. No, but I think some students want that. Other students want to live in Boston, Chicago, New
Hmm.
York. That's not who we are. And I think, frankly, if you're going to go to school for 4 years and you're going to invest that time and that energy and that being there for 4 years, it's good to have focus. And I think it's harder to focus sometimes when you're in that more urban setting, because there's
Hmm.
so many things that can take you out. Now, that's not to say that we haven't, made adjustments to students who have gotten opportunities, um, and figured out ways to make that happen. But the story that I always tell, and I love this story, is we have a graduate of ours, Kayla Davion, who graduated in 2017. She's on Tina Turner right now. She's going in. She's been covering Tina, but she's going to become the cover for Tina here in another month. She'll be doing Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday matinees. But she's one of the ICATs right now. But anyway, when she graduated, she went through her New York Showcase audition, and she got an agent, and she immediately booked waitress from that, and it was exciting and great. And they said, you're going to start May 2nd, and from her agent. And so anyway, she told her agent, she said, I can't do it, I'm not going to take it. And the agent was like totally dumbfounded, like, what are you talking about? And she's like, I worked very hard to get my college degree, and I'm going to walk across that stage on May 6th. So if they can renegotiate from that, that's fine, but I will be graduating and walking across the stage. I'm my first person in my family to graduate from college. And so I just think that that's part of what I love about our students, and that idea of, she wanted a college experience. She wanted that opportunity to be on a college campus, and that was what she valued. Some students aren't looking for that kind of experience. Some students are looking for, again, an experience that is more conservatory, with that kind of rigor, without that sort of more broad
Hmm.
experience in college. That's not who we are, you know. Um, we also don't want students to leave and just, only be able to sort of have conversations about Wicked. Like, we want you to understand and have a conversation about, what do you think about happening right now with the bill in Congress, and whether it's going to go through, and what is your situation with the world as a whole, and everything we've gone through in the last 2 years, about sort of the social unrest, and how that has led to changes that we've needed to see for so many years. How does that affect your art? That's really something that we want our students to have an opinion about, because we think that that's going to make them a better artist.
Beautifully said. But how we got to know, how did it end with Kayla? Did they renegotiate?
Renegotiated.
Let's go.
Yep.
Let's go.
Yeah, she's done 3 Broadway shows since she left. We have another student, Ren Rivera, and they immediately walked right into A Jagged Little Pill on Broadway from their virtual showcase. So we're we've got students all over New York right now on Broadway. And but again, we also, again, another thing about what makes different, I value the student teaching in rural Indiana theater education just as much as I do Kayla.
Mm, mm.
Because right now, art happens everywhere, not just in New York, not just in Chicago, not just in LA. And it's frankly more important in many ways that we're bringing arts to a kid that doesn't get it,
Hmm.
um, unless they have that teacher or that person they can look up to say, wow, that person helped save me from me not knowing what I was going to do with my life. So
It's so true. We're going to take a short break. And in a second here, we'll be back with Bill to talk about the Ball State audition process. Well, we are back with Bill Jenkins, and we're going to talk a little bit about the audition process. So, Bill, I'll start you off with a pretty tough question, which is just in general, what do you think makes a great audition for you?
um, I think for me, it's the student knowing who they are and not trying to be the best version of themselves that they think that we want them to be. I think that's the hardest thing for students to understand. You're enough. It's just
Mm.
you. We don't need you to sing the loudest or do the funniest monologue. We just need you to be you. And that's something that I think is really a hard skill to learn, because we have constantly been told more and more, we want you to be, animate, and that's not something that we're looking for. We just want students to be comfortable in their own skin, and somebody who ultimately can, again, tell a story in an authentically real, honest, and genuine way, whether they're singing, acting, or dancing. And that, I think, is something that's, maturity helps with that, but also just being comfortable, not worrying about what anybody else is doing or whatever anybody else wants you to do, just doing what you feel good about. And that's real important to me, and I think it's really important to all my colleagues.
Is there anything that you feel like you definitely don't want to see in a student's audition?
I think things that immediately are turnoffs for us, and I would say, as opposed to audition, I would say the entire audition process. I think students that come in with a great deal of egotism, general sort of like, I got it all figured out.
Mm.
Our take is always, if you got it all figured out, then why are you going to college? Just head on to wherever you're going to go. I think students that that are unwilling and or unable, I shouldn't say unwilling. I think many times it's an inability to take a note,
Mm-hmm.
to adjust, to change, to find a way to try something in a different way. There's no right way or wrong way. Well, some people could say there's a wrong way, but there's no right way to do something. There are better ways. There are ways that may give you more opportunity and potential for growth and change and telling a story in a way that ultimately has never been told before. But there's no wrong ways, and I think sometimes people are no, not the best way. And I think sometimes, especially with standardized testing, we've gotten to a point where it's like, what's the right answer? What's
Mm-hmm.
the best way? Um, so I think students going into auditions with an open mind and saying, I am going to be as malleable and as directable and as changeable as possible, in terms of what it is that I'm doing when I'm working with a coach, when I'm working with a teacher, when I'm working with a potential artist that I could work with hand in hand for 4 years, and showing that ability to adjust and maneuver on the fly is really important to us. I think students also that come in that are singing, I always say, sing something you could sing on your sickest day,
Hmm.
because I think sometimes we, especially with contemporary writers in the last 20 years, musical theater songs are written, and especially for female identifying singers, notes that human beings can't even begin to be able to do on a regular basis because they are just not attainable, just because of the human condition. So singing things that ultimately put you in a place of vocal duress,
Mm-hmm.
that make us worried for you, um, that's something that immediately for us is a turn off. Not because you, it's not because we're not turned off for you, but we're worried for you, I guess is
Mm-hmm.
what I should say, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be worried for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I also would say for the auditions, and something that's really important to us. Again, I mentioned it before, but we want students who pick material that is indicative of the kinds of stories that they want to tell, the kinds of monologues that they want to do. What you do in an audition tells us something about you, and
Mm-hmm.
so select material that makes us go, oh, you're a fan of the old school stuff, great.
Mm-hmm.
Or you like new school stuff, but understand how to add your own twist to it, great. Or you understand that writer, that playwright that is so important right now in the canon, that
Mm-hmm.
as we relook at the canon and reinvestigate what should be in the canon versus the things that have always been in the canon, how do we make sure we bring those new authors and new voices to light? That's the kind of stuff we're looking for in auditions constantly.
What about, so you talked a little bit about adjustments. This is my favorite question to ask, is just like, if you had to estimate in your own scorekeeping or however you're evaluating an audition, how much of the decision to get a yes artistically is about the skill displayed in the material? So in the songs and the monologues that they first do versus maybe some of those intangibles with interview questions or adjustments or all the other things that happen when they go in the room. So how much is really about the material for you versus how much is about all the other stuff?
Let me answer that in two parts. The first one is what I think my experience has been the vast majority of people do versus what we do. At least from my experience, I think most people would say it's about an 80-20 split, 80% what you present, 20% all those soft things. I think we're 50-50.
Hmm.
I feel like if you come in and you can, you're a baller dancer and you're an amazing actor and you can sing the lights out, but if you walk out of the room and are crappy to our student who's in the hallway,
Mm-hmm.
you're immediately off our list. It doesn't matter whether or not you can do all those other things. We just don't care. Um, I really think that that's something that tells you a lot about the school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was a situation we had one time where I was in an elevator at Unified's, and I was standing. This is 10 years ago, and I was standing in the back of an elevator, and somebody walked in with an auditionee with a parent, and they started talking derogatorily about our school, and they didn't know I was there. And it was one of those, it was at the Hilton in Chicago. And so people are around me, but there's those mirrors in those elevators. So eventually everybody started walking out and you could see the mom seeing me and you could see the kid see the mom's look. And I kind of had my head down and I let them do their thing. And then I walked off the elevator. And as I walked off the elevator, I just turned around and I said, break a leg with the rest of your auditions. And I just walked away.
Ooh.
And I just crossed that name off the list, even though that person had been someone we were interested in. And again, that was someone where ultimately you could only find out so much in 5 minutes. I mean, you don't have, you don't 10 minutes, I guess, in some situations, but the fact is you don't have as much time as you want. So I think that it would be for us, it's for sure 50-50. And we do things like if you're one of the students who makes a sort of like a priority list for us early on where we're really interested and we're cultivating you and seeing things, we latch you up with current students so you can email those students and ask questions, and we make sure that you have contacts with faculty and stuff. Students who are constantly engaging in that process, those are the students that we're immediately about. And that for us, that makes a difference in things like, can I find more financial support for that student? Or can I find other ways to incentivize that student's potential to want to come to us? We think of us as it's like creating a group of, whether it's 18 to 24 students that are going to become a mini family in that little grouping. And so I think for us, it's definitely 50.
And then for your school, how much is based on academics in terms of, let's say I'm on that priority list, I really like this pool of people. How does that work now in interacting with the academic university and grades and SATs and all those things?
Right. So one of the things I'll say about Ball State is we're test optional. That's something that we are very proud of. I know a lot of schools are starting to go to that. I think that's really important, especially as we look at the natural biases that exist in this country with testing unfairly advantaging more people from higher economic means. So we're really proud of that. We are a school that ultimately obviously can't take a student if they don't meet minimum academic standards. Here at Ball State, those standards have continued to go up. Incoming, GPA average for our students is about a 3.3 in terms of GPA. We are, this is the place where I always say, when your parents look at you and say, that math class, the grade in that math class may matter. This is the point where all that comes home. It's like, it's true. So we have a great relationship with admissions. In terms of contacting them if a student's on the wait list, or contacting them if a student's on borderline related to some financial need, and saying, this is a student with high ability. We feel like they're really a student that could really make the program better and make the university better. We have seen the university make alterations to get that student in. So that's something that we would encourage students to do if they're on the borderline. We obviously can't make a student's entire GPA, move up a full point. But what we can do is we can try to help sort of grease the wheel in those situations. We have financial packages that are specific to the arts, where we can get a student additional resources based on their talent. And that's something we do quite a bit as we work to incentivize students. And something I do want to mention, I've sort of alluded to it, but we are tremendously focused here, and have been for a long time, on making sure that we create representation in our our groups of students that we bring to campus, so that we are looking like the world these students are going to enter. And back in June of 2020, we had when everything was happening in our country and the George Floyd murder happened, we worked very hard to not just be a bunch of words coming out of this institution, but we put together an action plan that was put on the website in June of 2020 that said, we believe in this, we've believed in this, here are 6 ways we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And we did that. And through all of last year, we held ourselves accountable in ways. We created a new fund that was specifically designated to try to assist our BIPOC students who were underprivileged when they had emergency financial need. We created a new sort of demand with our seasons that 60% of our offerings were going to be from BIPOC and other previously marginalized communities in terms of authorship in our season. We created a new student advisory group that has representation across all of our disciplines that specifically brings to the table on monthly meetings issues that the students have, so students have voice. We want to make sure that we are creating a program where students don't feel like decisions are happening in a vacuum and they have no voice in those decisions. Because I think proactivity is what programs should be doing, not reactive. And I think for too many programs, they found themselves in a reactive place. And I feel like I'm proud of the fact that we've been proactive, and we've seen our increase in, as an example, BIPOC enrollment in our students in the last 15 years. That has more than doubled in terms of what we've done at Ball State. And that is, to me, putting your money where your mouth is.
While we're still on the auditions, and I will promise we'll talk more about a little bit of what's going on in the world too. But while we're still on auditions, I'd love to talk about how you talked about, for students, how the disciplines interact. How, as you're scoring students, or as you're, looking at auditions, how does it work with my acting, my singing, dance, especially, let's say, for musical theater?
Right.
How do those three disciplines get scored? Does one get dropped? Are they weighted all evenly? How do you sort of do that?
Yeah, they're weighted all evenly. We have a very complicated scoring system that we've created that allows for what we think of as an area perhaps getting sort of like a wild card. So to say, listen, we know this student's voice may be weaker than others, but this student is such an amazing dancer or such an
Hmm.
amazing actor. Would be our gimme, so to speak. We will do anything we can to get this student in. Um, we also will look really closely, as I said before, musicianship matters to us. So there's a musicianship test that students take, just so we have a sort of a general benchmark of where students are. That students will take, that weighs into it as well. But those other skills we talked about, how the student is in the room, that is equal to
Hmm.
singing, acting, dancing, and musicianship for us. So all five of those things are weighted the same.
And then how does this work with video audition? So if I understand correctly, you guys are not using pre-screens, but you will accept a pre-screen as a video audition. How does that work, both in terms of how you maybe evaluate some of those harder, softer skills, but then also how does that get weighed compared to people who are doing live auditions for you?
Well, we learned a lot, I think, as we all did during the pandemic, about what you could do virtually versus what you couldn't do virtually. I think the thing we learned that you can do virtually is, provided you can ensure that there's that every student has a similar technological ability, which again is not always the case. And one of the things that we're really working to make sure students can have equal footing. But we try to look and give students opportunities if we feel like technologically they have suffered, based on the fact that they did an audition and they didn't sound great, but we couldn't tell if it was an equipment thing or if it was more about, their internet access, as an example. We'll
Hmm.
give students a chance. We'll call them and say, can you resubmit this song? Can you find some other way or place to do it, etc. I think we give a little more flex there than maybe we would have in the past, now that we
Hmm.
understand this. Um, Back before we were dealing with the pandemic, I think I always told students it's really hard if you're doing a video audition to get the same kind of consideration than if you were in person, whether it's at Unifieds or if you're doing these special MTCA auditions we set up, or whether it's dealing with auditions on campus. That has changed and altered now since the pandemic. I feel like we are far more. The onus is on us to change, not on students to change. And I think we've changed by making sure that we give more accessibility, more opportunity to say, oh, that was a fail. Let's have the student retry that. And I think that we are consistently looking at each student individually and going, there's something there. We don't think the technology allowed us to see it to the extent that we'd like to. We're going to have the student redo it. That's something that we're constantly working on, and we'll constantly work on this year.
You spoke a little bit about, talking about sort of the specific challenges of 2021 and beyond. Spoke a little bit about sort of some of the commitments you've made to BIPOC students. So I'd love to just hear if there's anything else you wanted to say about that, sort of the specific discussions around the demand for racial equity, but also then just to talk a little bit about the virtual world and what you've learned in 2020 and what you're carrying forward into 2021 and beyond.
I would say that we talked about the fact that we're in the middle of Muncie, Indiana. And I think that the thing I've realized more than anything is that a desire for something and a need for something and a want for something doesn't make it necessarily achievable unless you figure out how to activize it, or, and this again, the word activism, how do you create that active push to make those things happen in ways that ultimately maybe before I would have been a little bit more inclined to go, I don't know what to do. Now I'm just like, what's the next thing that we can do? How can we push the envelope even farther? I would encourage students, if that's an important part, and I would hope it would be important for any person going into the arts, that they ask difficult questions of schools about how they are activating their goals, not just what their goals are. I think we get a free pass in education that I think is unfair. And I think we've got to figure out how to hold ourselves more accountable.
Hmm.
I just feel so strongly. I give an example. I had a difficult conversation I had with a great friend and a great colleague about an interaction that colleague had a previous interaction with a colleague of mine who was a BIPOC individual, and that conversation led to, I think, a real successful place where I saw, and my colleague who was BIPOC looked at me and said, "That's activism in action. That's actually advocacy in action. It's actually having difficult conversations." Two white people, two privileged people in a room having conversations that aren't about, let's talk about all the ways in which all of this has changed. No, it's about, let me talk to you about a place where I saw how you can do better, and I would want you to do the same about how I can do better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes back to the heart of what I think the last year and a half, 2 years has taught me, which is the biggest fault, the biggest saddest thing is when people are unwilling to have the conversation. And it's because they're afraid to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the real thing that makes me just real emotional about it, because it's like, I I don't want to say something that I'll regret. I don't want to venture into territory where I may screw up. I would rather
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm going to screw up. Let's talk. Let's
Mm-hmm.
figure out how to make this better. Let's change. What can we change here? And I had a student, again, in one of our student advisory meetings, a great student of ours, who last year made a comment to me when they talked about a particular show we did and how what was represented on the stage they didn't feel like was what was indicative of Ball State. And
Hmm.
I found myself totally agreeing and going, you're absolutely right, you're absolutely right. And afterwards, the student came up to me and said, I just want you to know, while I appreciate the fact that you're saying it's right, I need you to give me space to tell you how I feel before you try to solve the problem. Give me space to say, let me get it all out. And I was like, heard. And so now when somebody presents something, I go on. And I just start writing it down. And then I figure out how my brain, which is always about how do you solve it, can sort of activate things. So that's my takeaway.
It's a really good note, and so I think for a lot of people to hear, especially as we have more and more of these conversations, and if we have had a lot of these conversations, sometimes I think we have a tendency to go, yeah, I know, and I'm already past that. I've been doing that already. As opposed to really fully hearing someone out and saying, okay, I want to hear your full lived experience,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can maybe respond, or maybe this isn't actually the right place for me to respond. Maybe I just have to take that with me and learn from it.
Yeah.
Let's just talk a little bit about the virtual world too. So that was mostly on the demands of racial equity, but yeah.
I would say, in terms of the virtual world, the thing that we've learned the most here is creating an authentic experience for students. While it can never be duplicated virtually, we can create situations and circumstances where students feel as though positive things are happening and we are moving forward rather than just spinning our wheels.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give the best example I can. We nobody had showcases last year. I mean, you couldn't. We were actually very lucky in the fact that we were there the week before in New York everything happened in 2020. So we were one of the only schools that actually got our showcase in and got our cabaret in, and then everything shut down literally the next Monday.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we did a virtual showcase, and we invested a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of resources in making sure the virtual showcase didn't just happen, but that the quality of production happened in a way we felt like was indicative of what we wanted students to feel like they had gotten something out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
We signed more students last year from the virtual showcase than we had the 3 years previous.
Hmm.
And I think it's because we let the students' work speak for itself, but we also invested the resources necessary into doing that. And so for me, what I think I've learned is doing something is different than doing something well.
Hmm.
The second thing I've learned is that nothing beats being in a theater with other human beings and experiencing theater. We are opening Bring It on Friday here. We're very fortunate in the fact one of our fabulous alums, Meghan Farley, who's the associate director and associate choreographer on Six, has come in and she's directing it. And she has been an amazing person to bring back to campus. And we also have a mask exception policy that we have gotten approved, which has rigid protocols where our students will be similar to New York. All the audience will be masked. Everyone backstage will be masked, but our students will be unmasked. And we're very excited about that. We also have a situation where the vast majority of our entire company, in fact, I can't get into the numbers because of obviously privacy issues, but let's just say we're looking real good in terms of the total vaccines that are happening within our casts. So the fact of the matter is we're in a place where we can do it because everybody has understood how to work as a team and do what's for the good of the whole. So I think that the second thing I've learned is being in a theater is magical, and that will never change. And the third thing is finding out about the importance of other at a time where we were so caught with ourselves for so long, we not having that, and helping students rediscover the importance of community has been a real challenge. We had a faculty meeting recently where a colleague stepped forward and said, students are in such a really tough place right now. I feel like I go home and I feel like I'm losing myself because I'm trying so hard to help my students, whether it's what they've gone through with the pandemic, what they've gone through with all the social justice stuff we've talked about, and what they've just gone through with the sort of the sadness of losing the last 20 months of their life, not having a homecoming and not having their senior graduation and so we found that seniors are a lot different than freshmen and sophomores because they didn't experience that in the same way. So I think taking each individual technologically, I'm thinking that manifests itself in sort of where students are now, looking at each individual student in their own unique way, not putting students in groups. These are the acting students, the design tech students, the theater ed students. It's not that. It's more the freshman acting students, the sophomore design tech students, the junior musical theater students. Every group is is different. And being able to be flexible with that as a faculty and as an educator has been a challenge, but I think has been worth it because we've been able to sort of meet students where they are.
We certainly have noticed that at MTCA, the difference between the 2019 class, the 2020 class, and now the 2021. I mean, it is like three completely different experiences in terms of what their experiences of the pandemic was, depending what was taken away from them, how they had to adjust, how they had to pivot, what they're good at, what skills they need more help with. These three different total classes.
Oh, we had a student, our first year experience class, there was a meeting at which a student asked, and they were totally, when they asked the question, they were very authentic and genuine when they said it. I said, how do you make friends? And when I heard that, I was like, what? And then I started thinking, they've been trapped in this for a year and a half. They don't know how to interact. They don't know how to do things that ultimately for many of us seem so commonplace. And having patience with that. We call it around here the place between having grace and demanding and having rigor. How do we find that happy place? And it's hard.
Hmm.
It's not going to be easy. And I think anybody who says it is, isn't being honest with people. It's hard. And so we are just continuously saying to students, we hear what you're saying. Let's try to pivot again. Let me try to rethink that. And that's all you can do.
Speaking of for 2022, are you guys looking at doing any virtual auditions? Are there any, along with the unifieds, is there potentially the option for a virtual live audition?
Yes. Yes, we have. If you go to bsu.edu/theater dance, you can go to that website and you can see there's a whole audition page. We have campus auditions. We will be at the Unifieds in the different cities, and there's a virtual audition component as well. There's also several pages that we would suggest to students that they look at in terms of our expectations in the auditions, things that we would recommend, just general things that I think will help
Hmm.
students as they go through that. The person that I want to make sure I mention, who is our number one sort of guru. We actually have two. First of all, Eva Patton is our faculty coordinator for all of our auditions. Eva worked at Fordham for a number of years in New York. She's a terrific acting teacher. She's been here now for 10 years, and she coordinates all of our auditions from a faculty perspective. And then our recruitment coordinator, who's a professional personnel member, is Andrea Sadler. Those are the two people that you need to know you'll know most closely through the process. Any questions you have, their email addresses are there on the site. You can access that. They can give you the hints and sort of the things that we're thinking about. You need to apply to Ball State University as well. Now, some students prefer to go through the audition before they do the application. You're totally able to do that, but just be aware that financial packages tend to really be more robust for those individuals who go through this process earlier rather than later. And so we always recommend to students the application is very minimal. We would suggest to students that they get those applications in as soon as they can.
That's fantastic advice. And that leads us to our last question, which is just, is there any other advice that you'd want to give to a prospective student, maybe who's looking at Ball State this specifically, and maybe looking this year? Maybe it's a 17-year-old who is thinking about auditioning in the coming months. Anything else that you'd really want them to know before they look at your school?
Well, hopefully you've gotten a sense of who we are. We are a program that I think is going to make you better, but we also want you to come here and make us better. And that's by you being authentic, by you being kind and generous, and also ultimately a good person, because this is a business where I feel like very much what we put into the world, we will get back.
Mm-hmm.
And again, what we learned in the last 2 years, we got to put more good into the world. And we really feel like here you're gonna create amazing art. You're gonna meet some of the best friends of your life. You're gonna work with amazing teachers who are professionally active right now, doing what it is that they're doing. We were fortunate enough to have Michael Rafter and Didi Batiste come and do a workshop there for MTCA, and
Heck yeah.
Michael's gonna musical direct Funny Girl on Broadway, and Didi is right now working at the Goodman Theater in Chicago, and she's one of the best acting teachers ever. And they're the kind of indicative of the kind of people that you'll get to work with.
Mm.
But I also think as you go into this season, it's all going to be okay. You're going to do great.
Mm.
Breathe, and be yourself. Just know that you bring value into this, and that you ultimately have something to offer, and be authentically you. And I think if you do that, you're going to find there's a lot of great schools. You're going to find a great school, and don't allow what other people think is the right path for you to take you down that path, because you need to go on your path. And that path may not be what you initially expected it to be. My guess is that 85 to 90% of the students think right now one thing, and will see a completely different reality by the time they get a year from now.
Mm.
And that's a good thing. It's not a like a, oh my gosh, things are changing, paths are changing. That's good. That's good, because we all learned that when paths change, as they did 20 months ago, how you pivot and adjust and adapt will make the difference between you being truly feeling fulfilled and versus feeling empty. And we want people to feel fulfilled.
Just as you're going to be teaching them at your school how to adjust and change and pivot. How perfect.
Uh-huh.
If people loved hearing you today, which I imagine they must have, I know they can follow at Ball State University. That's on Instagram. Do you have specific tags in your own socials that you'd want people to follow?
I am Instagram Ball State Bill. How about that?
Oh,
There you
Ball
go.
State Bill.
Ball
By the way, I
State.
also did notice you dropped a baller dancer in there
I
earlier. I
did
did catch
indeed.
that.
I did
You can use that
indeed.
anytime you want. You go to Ball State, you get to be baller anytime you want.
Ball State Bill on Instagram. On Facebook, it's William Jenkins. And I am also Ball State Bill on the TikTok, which I'm
Yes.
working on. I have an 11-year-old who's helping me and is desperately trying to get me to start to post more. I posted a last year. We do a big fundraiser called One Ball State Day, and we are the reigning Ball State champions. It's an online day of giving. Last year, we, meaning the Department of Theater and Dance, beat athletics,
Heck
the
yes.
entirety of athletics for the third year in a row. Thank you very much. But as part of that, I had to dye my hair pink, which I did. And so that was why I started the TikTok page. They're like, Bill, people gotta find you. You gotta go to TikTok. So I did,
We love it.
and I'm learning. I'm learning.
Competitive beneficence. That's what we're getting from Ball State. I love it.
100%.
Well, Bill, thank you so much for the time today. We really, really appreciate it. It was great to chat with you.
Thanks to both of you. Take care.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Bill. I think he is such a warm and intelligent man. He was fun. He was funny. And I hope you can feel through the airwaves how passionate he is about what we were discussing, because I certainly could on my end. There is a lot to dive deeper into here. So I'm going to give some honorable mentions to the idea of like pivoting and changing lanes. We've discussed that somewhat, and we'll probably go deeper into future episodes. And a near miss silver prize to how much can I really do, which we'll definitely find some time to talk about in terms of these overfull ideas of what will happen in a college world. But Bill gave me this beautiful setup pass with his discussion of practice/rehearsal during his sports analogy, and I just can't resist joining him on it. So I'm going to. I really like the way Bill discussed how important it is to love your practice. We talk a lot about process over product here, but if you really narrow in on what we mean by process, we're talking about practice/rehearsal, right? In the sports world, they have this saying that says practice doesn't make perfect, perfect practice does, which is really a way of just saying it matters how you practice, not just that you do. And while I think in the artistic world, we would question if there's such a thing as perfect practice, we still do agree that the way that you practice is incredibly important, that it be something that is challenging and improving you and not just settling in old habits or instincts, which actually could be detrimental to your artistic growth. That's part of the reason at MTCA why we emphasize having artistic experts in each discipline on our team, with your coaches only teaching what they are truly expert in so that your practice will be most productive. But back to what Bill said, which is the idea of loving how you practice and how much that's so important. Bill talked a little bit about the balance between rigor and grace in their program in this pandemic moment. And I think that's true for us as artists as we practice. Not only do we have to have enough expertise in our practice that it is productive and enough rigor, but we need to be able to enjoy it enough that we can find consistency in it. If there is no love of art, but only rigor in the way that we practice, it will not be sustainable. And importantly, as Bill said, the practice is the thing you do more of than the games. The show is just the result of all that work. If you've set up the way you rehearse the right way, then the show can be the easy part, right? It's just a continued rehearsal, but now there are people watching. But from a time perspective, that work, that is the vast majority of what we do. To make the sports analogy you're all dying for, I know you want it, I'm going to bring back our old friend Steve Nash, who's a former NBA MVP. He's a point guard. For his second bit of wisdom on the pod, he also talked a bit about resiliency earlier, for those fans. When he was nearing the end of his career and ultimately deciding to retire, people were pretty surprised, right? They would point out to him he may no longer be at an MVP level as a player, but he was still a really impactful player who could help a team win. And didn't he want to try to squeeze out another year or two of 82 games? Where he certainly was still good enough to do so. And he would say that the 82 games were not the problem. Until the very end, he loved every second he was on the court and could definitely have filled out a few more seasons of time. But that preparation, the off-season training, the in-season work on his body, the weightlifting, the medical treatments, all of that became too much. And he had come to hate it. He'd come to really loathe that work. And he knew, I think correctly, he knew if I'm not able to prepare with that level of joy that I bring to the game, then I really have no business walking on that court. So, for all of you, how can we find a productive practice that has enough joy in it for us to carry that joy into those audition rooms? Well, if you found this episode productive and you want to hear more, please grace us with a follow. We would also appreciate you if you were to rate us, review us, comment on us, do whatever you got to do. We suggest 5 stars if you practice competitive beneficence, and an ironic 5 stars if you perform beneficent competition. You can also reach out to us with questions for the pod at mailbag@mappingthecollegeaudition.com, or reach out to Meghan and me directly at Charmer7 and at Meghan Marie 2014. If you're interested in working with MTCA for help with your individual prep for your college audition journey, please check us out at mtcollegeauditions.com. You can also follow us at Musical Theater College Auditions. This is on Instagram, or at TweetMTCA on Twitter. I just said Twitter like a British person, on Twitter. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, don't forget, soft skills can be hard, but not all hard skills are easy. We'll see you next week.